Meredith, can you hear us? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. All right. At 6 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Before we approve the agenda, did anyone need to remove anything from the consent agenda? Are there any questions pertaining to the consent agenda? If not, be looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
All right. Motion by Matt. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. General public comment. Anyone from the public wish to speak tonight? I see a couple folks on. Yes, Mary Beth.
Hi guys, I just wanted to quickly say that I reached out to our Friends of Education men and women tonight, and I just wanted to bring up that we're having, I guess, a little bit of stalemate providing funding to the actual structure of the outdoor classroom. We went to the town board of Middletown about the ARPA funds, and unfortunately, those were all spoken for after the town office, went a little over budget or was, more expensive than planned. And then we also talked to Corey and Ashley about the extra ESSER funds. And Lewis just kind of described that unfortunately we wouldn't be able to use those funds in the actual building of the outdoor classroom. So that was just something that the girls I spoke to tonight kind of just wanted to bring that to your attention, and maybe we can further talk about it as the budget process goes forward. And then that kind of leads me to my next little tidbit of, a bunch of months ago on another school board meeting, I just brought up the fact that when I was substituting a few times in September, that, since our buildings are historic and old, they were kind of built for large windows and lots of light. But unfortunately, with no central AC, it can be very warm in the classrooms, especially with the older grades. They're in the original building, so they have huge, beautiful windows and lots of light. But unfortunately, it gets very, very hot in there. So I was in a second grade classroom a few times, and each time it was well above 80. So I know that I brought it to Corey's attention, and she was obviously well aware of it, just because it affects the way teachers are able to teach and kids are able to learn. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as well, as far as hopefully maybe that was brought to your attention as far as budgeting. And if not, maybe we can, start a conversation around that. So that was it. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Everyone should have received all the information. So be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as is.
I'll make that motion if nobody else did.
Nobody did. All right, thank you, Cara. All those in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. And Guess the only comment I just wanted to make on, one of the resignations, um, uh, accept the resignation with regret, I guess. It was, for Susan Rosso. And the only reason why I bring it up, she's been at the school for how many years? Oh, that's what I understood, but I didn't know how long.
I don't know how many years, a long time.
Okay.
I
All right.
think she started when I was still in elementary school, so the early to mid 90s, at least as a substitute.
The exact date. Okay. All right, I'll move on to reports. I have the superintendent's report.
Thanks, Eric. Just have a few items. At this time of the year, majority of our focus is on budget and preparation for town meetings. I do have a few items in the report, just to review. At this month's GRCSU board meeting, I did provide a strategic plan updates. I did provide a copy of the presentation, place that into your board folders, as well as I've encouraged the board members to read over a copy of the GRCSU minutes, which is a kind of a detailed overview of what was covered. And if anyone in the public would like to view that, obviously, Guinness can share a copy of the video. It's also on Fake TV, as well as when we post the minutes, there'll be a copy of that as well. In the folders as well, we did place a copy of the wording for the board to review. Obviously, the numbers are not correct. They've not been filled in, but it's more for the board just to take a look at the layout, the language of the warning, just to see if they're okay with that. And if there are any suggestions, edits, formatting changes they would like, just let myself or Kristen McGinnis know. We can begin making those changes around that. I do want to note that the language around the budget has changed this year. Last year, many school districts across the state began to shift the language. We did not. We had a kind of a 1 year grace period. So this year we have changed our language in terms of how we report that. So just make note of that in the warning as well. So if any questions you guys have myself or Lewis, we'll be more than happy to review that with you. I also have included a copy of a very long copy in the board packet around the FAQ around Act 172. I know that that is a bit of a concern around funding. I know that Lewis will talk a little bit about this in detail. I think Wells Springs, this board and this district have been okay with regard to this, but I think others have been disadvantaged. But this gives some nice information around Act 152, and I think, like I said, Lewis, as we presented last night at Rutland Town's board meeting, did a very nice job of breaking it down and just kind of talk about what this really means for boards and taxpayers over the next 4 to 5 years. You hear a lot about the ESSER cliff that we navigated very nicely. We're okay there, but the next cliff for us to navigate would be Act 172 cliff. That's the next 5 years. So we should be all right, but just something for our boards to consider as we budget, this year as well as upcoming years. That's at this time, that's really about it. The rest is informational. If you have any questions, I'll be more happy to answer them at this time.
So when you say Act 172 clip,
Yes.
what exactly does that mean? I mean, is it going to be? Are we going to be?
So I'll let Lewis, because I think
Okay.
pertaining to you, I think Lewis will do better.
I'll cover it. Do you want me to answer it now, or do you want to talk about it during budget time?
We can talk about during budget. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm not trying to scare anyone, but it's just that you'll hear that term a lot in media, in the newspapers. And I think you have to
Okay.
understand what that really means. And there are some districts that really should not be concerned, while there should be just good navigating. But like I said, Lewis will talk a little bit more about this in his budget discussion. So.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Did anyone else have any questions? All right. Cool. All right, principals reports.
So as a school staff, one of the things that we've done is we're starting to consider a GIS system. as a whole, looking for a way to strengthen our approach towards behavior interventions as a staff. Students took a school climate survey, which is an anonymous survey put out by PBIS. And actually our 5th and 6th graders will be using the data collected from this to work with Up for Learning to create a school plan to improve our school climate. And staff, we also send out a survey to parents. We'll be using that information as a staff, and then staff were also asked to fill out information. So we're just looking at strengthening that as a whole. Let's see, we've got some fun things coming up. We've got a school-wide activity day that's planned for that half day in December. All teachers have been asked to plan an activity for kids. So we've got things ranging from like creating gingerbread houses to cross-country skiing if we have snow, reindeer games in gym to slime making. So we've got a whole array of things, and kids are going to get to pick 3 activities and rotate throughout the day. And it's been really nice because we've had staff, we have staff like our occupational therapist and our speech and language pathologist who are in our buildings for a half a day to a day, just once a week. And we've even had some of them reach out, ask if they could be part of it. So that's really nice to see. Our rock climbing team started this month. They actually just started on Monday. We have over 20 students on our team, which is like a third of our student body. So it is huge in Middletown. And I guess last year they placed 2nd. So it's a pretty big deal. And then the one of the changes that we made, we had to make a shift in our after school program from, we were running under a pre-K license, and we lost a staff member. And so because of that, we were having difficulty sticking to the ratio required by that pre-K license. So we switched to a single skills program similar to what Wells does. And the kids seem to be really enjoying it. Looking forward to having Eric come and teach the kids how to yo-yo. They've been making ornaments and bird feeders, and they've got similar to what Wells does. They've got a single skill that they work on for the week, and they've got activities that they do. So that's been, we're looking to eventually switch back to a licensed program because there are benefits to that. But in the meantime, this has been working out well.
Right. I had a few questions. So the school climate survey,
Yes.
I know in the past, and I think it was pre-COVID, has that been done every year? Do you know?
I am not I know it's been done the past few years. So we do have, I'm able to access the data from previous years.
Okay.
We do seem to be missing one set of data. We thought that it was also done in the spring of last year, and we don't have that, but we do have the fall of last year. So we have multiple years. So the kids look for trends over the years to see, where were areas that we needed to improve upon, last fall compared to this fall, and what changes the kids made to boost school climate, and if those changes were impactful.
All right. And so do the kids actually look at this too?
So the kids, what we do is it is anonymous. For the online one is anonymous for older kids or younger kids. We do paper copy, and it's completely anonymous for them as well. And so the 5th and 6th graders look at the overall data. So we look at, they're asked a question like, I like school. And so we let the kids know, in 1st grade, hear what the 1st graders think. They have a rating scale of 1 to 5. If 1 being low end, they don't really like school, and 5 being I love school. And so they get to see what the average is by grade for each of the questions. And then they identify those areas where maybe there were lower scores.
Okay. I didn't realize that it was, I got that specific. So,
Yeah.
And the parent climate survey, is that new, or is that another?
So I'm not sure if that one's been done before. We kind of threw it out there just to see what happened. I am not sure there's a lot of data from previous years on that. So
Yeah, the parent and staff survey as well. So were the staff doing it too?
So the staff were doing it too, and I do believe they've done it in the past as well.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember because I know maybe it was back in 2019 we saw some of the climate survey stuff, but it's been a while. And You kind of answered one of my questions about the rock climbing team. You said they placed second. Now, my question was, do they compete? And where are they competing? I mean,
So, good question. So they practice at the Green Mountain Rock Climbing Center in Rutland once a week. And then once, like February hits, I believe, they have competitions on Saturday. I'm not sure if they are all at the Green Mountain Rock Climbing Center or if there are other gyms throughout.
It's just at that one.
There you go. I was gonna say. So all of their competitions are at Green Mountain Rock Climbing Center in Rutland.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Did anyone else have any questions for Lori? Okay, Carol?
We actually are doing the same thing, the Up for Learning, but it's our fourth grade unit, and we did a school climate survey already. Fourth graders are actually ones that are going to go and administer it with the younger kids. And we will start that process in analyzing the data and having those meetings with Up for Learning in January. We're also starting a new program with our school counselor in January, doing weekly meetings based on relationship building. It kind of parallels, goes along with what we're doing with restorative practice. But she'll be in the classroom specifically working on relationships and helping them develop the relationships they need in the school setting. Probably the one thing, the concern that has continues is our problem with having sub. So we have not been fully staffed probably since mid-October. I don't think we've had a day where we've been fully staffed. And I do have to thank our teachers because our IAs step up and help us and are very flexible in changing positions and making sure that we can cover everything that we need to cover. We also just over the weekend, Corey and I did an event here where it was a 4-hour drop off for families to drop kids off so they could go do whatever they wanted to do. And we were hoping it was going to be a little bit more popular, but it was a lot of fun. The kids had a great time. They played games, made cookies, watched a movie.
They didn't want to leave.
And they did not want to leave for 4 hours. So that was, yeah. And I guess lastly, the one thing I had forgotten to put in here is that we will be starting GIST, and we were able to award 3 scholarships. We had put out a contest and had kids write an essay about why sports was important, why lifelong sports are important. And we were able to award 3 scholarships so that we can support the students.
So about the staffing challenge, is that just for trying to get subs or?
Yeah, we are, I'm going to say, and Corey and I were talking about this earlier. We said our staff puts in when they know if they need a day off for an appointment or whatever. Some of them are in there for 2 weeks, a month. They're not filled. And so then we just have to make adjustments to staff so that we can make sure everything's covered.
And did you ever well, I know he sent an email about the PA system. Did you ever get a response from the guy from audio?
No, we were just talking about.
Okay.
He had sent us an email about wanting to come visit, and the timing was not.
It was like this day before.
Right.
Yeah.
So we do need to get that.
Because it really isn't like when we do a school-wide announcement, you can't hear it in here. If the dishwasher's running, like the PE teacher couldn't hear it in here. We end up using our walkie-talkies if it's something that's really important that we have to say right away.
Okay. Yeah. Just curious, because I think they've got the expertise. Okay. All right, anyone else have any questions? Okay, we'll move on to,
Sorry, I had a question.
oh, go ahead.
Are our rates competitive in terms of finding staff for teachers that are, put in their PTO like 2 months ahead? Is it just that there's a lack of people out there, or is it that we are coming in really under what we need to be in to staff temporary positions?
But I think it's a variety of reasons. So we did just raise our rates to $16 an hour they were at 15. That's probably still less competitive than some of our surrounding schools, especially New York, where we border. When we looked at, we surveyed some area schools, and a few of them were at $18 and above. The only one that was less than us was Mill River. So that's definitely playing partially into the problem. I think the other piece is just a lack of people in the job market. And that's a struggle with many of our positions, both support staff, teaching, and as well as definitely subs.
And Matt, and talking with regional superintendents who do pay a little bit more than us, they're still having issues finding subs as well. So while, I think as Louis said, rate of pay is one factor, it's just that we are dealing with a depleted workforce as well, just for individuals who are moving in. And we have actually found across the SU as we identify substitutes, a lot of times those substitutes will then move into a para position because we have such a need for paras or support staff. And then that really further depletes our sub pool because we are, finding good, good individuals who want to work for us on a regular basis. And so we are in a sense robbing Peter to pay Paul, but it's kind of stopping, addressing one issue, but still creating another.
A follow up on that. I know I've heard this before, and I'm sorry for asking again, but what are the requirements to be a substitute? I'm assuming a background check, and are there any other trainings that are necessary? And could we do could we almost put on like a free clinic or something to help get community members in there? Go ahead.
To be just a general sub, they have to go through the same requirements as an employee, so the background check, fingerprinting, stuff like that. But there's no specific training requirements. If they're going to sub in one of our preschool programs, then there is extra trainings. I would say roughly about 15 to 20 hours worth of trainings that they would need to participate in order before they can move into that role. But I mean, we have people ranging from high school diplomas to bachelor's, former retired teachers. So there is a range, but there is no specific requirements. I mean, obviously the more education and experience, the better, but we have individuals that just have high school diplomas that are working. Maybe they're going to college or stay-at-home parents or anything, stuff like that.
I'm just spitballing, but maybe there's an opportunity where we invite people in and invite to pay for their background check or whatever fingerprinting costs there are, and give an orientation of like what it is to be a teacher. Hopefully pull people from the community to step in and make $16 an hour to teach our kids. Could be fun. But
if there's any community events that are happening that you think it would be a good opportunity, our sub coordinator does go out to the community. She was at the lawn sale. She's been to craft fairs, any events that are going to draw community members, because that's really what we're looking to pull, community members, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, people that want to be in the schools part-time. So like I said, if there's a community event that's coming up and that you think would be great, just let me know and I could let my sub-coordinator know so that she can either register for the event or make the arrangements, whether it's even nights, weekends, she does them.
that's really cool. I had no idea. Thank you.
I just have a quick question. Is public question time over?
Yeah, but there's another one at the end of the agenda, so you'll have time to speak. Okay. Yeah, so and in case folks didn't know that all the subs are coordinated at the SU level, right?
Yes.
And, so, okay. All right, so we'll move on to finance.
So the first item of business is to approve and announce tuition. So each year we have to set a tuition rate for both of our schools. It's the same rate for both schools, for kindergarten through sixth grade. And that would be for students who are non-residents that may be attending our schools. Periodically, we do get some students. It's typically from Ira students that are attending Middletown. But it is possible that you could have a tuition student attending as well. I don't think we've had one in the past, but anyway, in the packet I have provided what our current rate is. Right now it's 15,500, and I've also provided what some of the area elementary schools are charging, and I've also provided what the state average is and my recommendation for next year, which is a $1,000 increase with a rate of $16,500.
Any questions for Lewis? We'd be looking for a motion to approve the FY25 announced tuition rate. Do you remember what it was the year before? I can't remember how much it was the previous.
15,000.
Okay,
So FY23 was 15,000. We increased it by 3%. This year, the increase is a little bit more. We are a little behind other schools as well as the state average. So I did 1,000 instead of the 500.
okay. Yeah, that was my next question. It is a percentage, how much? Okay. Well, I'll make the motion to approve the recommended announced tuition rate. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Amanda? Any opposed? Sue?
Why do you come to me first on that one?
Because I wasn't looking, so I didn't know if you said yes or no.
We're good.
All right, motion carries. All right, that's done.
Okay, on to budget. So tonight we're looking at the second draft. We did present the first draft last month. When we looked at the first draft, I provided a summary of changes, and that is all. I also kept that on tonight's draft as well. So if you weren't at the last meeting, or if you forgot what we discussed last meeting, all of the highlights are on that first page under summary of changes, draft one. So the draft one expense was up by 192,000, which was 3.3%. And some of those main drivers I've listed, health insurance and benefits are always two of the biggest drivers. Health insurance benefits, wage increases. And so I've listed some of those other things as well. Looking at draft two, again, I've highlighted some of the major highlights. Right now, budgeted expenses up by 4.5%. It's an increase of approximately 68,000 over the first draft. Some of the changes that are really driving that are the SU budget, which was approved, was not in the first draft. It's in the second draft. We updated vocational tuition. Secondary tuition is in here. I've estimated a 3% increase in tuition. We do have a slight decrease in students, which even with the increase in tuition rates, it is resulting in a $15,000 decrease. And that tuition or the student decrease is mainly a result of the 12th grade class that's graduating is a lot larger than the 6th grade class that's moving up. So you do tend to see that some years. It's always better when it's that direction than it is the other direction, because from a budget standpoint. And then the other things that are in here are the removal of the small schools grant under revenue. And the reason for that is with new Act 127, and I'll go into a whole Act 127 explanation in a few minutes. But Act 127 does account for small schools. And if you meet certain criteria, you're getting an extra percentage of students in the student count, and it removes the small schools grant. And in this case, it actually works in Wellspring's favor to get the extra students over the revenue piece. And I think it was an extra, I believe it was an extra about $50,000 in revenue based on the student count as opposed to the $172,000 grant. So those are the major highlights. If there's any questions on those, I'll go into more details on tax rate calculation and Act 127. Okay, so Act 127, FY25 will be the first year that we're now looking at our tax rates under that funding formula. This is the change. Right now we're under Act 68. And the biggest change is the way pupils are weighted in the tax rate calculation. So in Act 68, you took an ADM count at the beginning of the school year. ADM stands for average daily membership. So day 11 through day 30, you counted how many students were in your building, and that resulted in an ADM number. So if you had 50 students, you had 50 ADM. It's 1 for 1. If a student moved into your school in the middle of that ADM count, you got partial credit for that student. But if the students were there for the full period, you got a full credit for that student. With the Act 68, they took your ADM and they weighted it based on level of instruction. So if you had an elementary student, they were weighted at 1. If you had a secondary student, they were weighted at 1.13. If you had a preschool student, they were weighted at 0.46. But that was really the biggest extent of the weighting that occurred in Act 68. So that they took those weighted numbers and they took a 2-year average and they gave you an equalized pupils number. Equalized pupils was a dividing number. You took your education spending divided by your equalized pupils to come up with a spending per pupil. With Act 127, it changes the way those numbers are weighted, and it puts a lot more emphasis on poverty and free and reduced populations. So it takes your ADM and it looks at how many students you have that are eligible for free and reduced. It looks at the size of your school. It looks at the size of your population, and it applies weighting factors based on those 3 categories, as well as ELL, which is English language learners. We don't currently have any in our SU, so we don't get any of that weighting. Based on that new weighting funding formula, there's some districts who are in high poverty areas who are seeing a big increase in their pupil count, and they will be extremely advantaged by the change in this law. For those districts that are in towns with extremely low poverty rates, they're going to see not as big of an increase in their pupil count, and they're going to be extremely disadvantaged by the change in this law. And then you have those districts who are sort of in the middle, have average poverty rates, and they're not seeing a big change in their funding. Wellsprings, fortunately, falls in somewhere in the middle, and this law is not having a significant impact on your funding. When Chris was speaking earlier about a financial cliff because of Act 127, really what that refers to is that there is a piece of the law that states, because there are some districts who are extremely disadvantaged by the change in the funding formula, the most that your tax rate could increase during this period of implementation, which is the next 4 years, there is a 5% cap on what your tax rate could increase for the district. The CLA is applied after that, so you could see a change greater than or less than 5% based on your CLA. But pre-CLA, the most that your tax rate can increase is 5%. The only exception to that is if your education spending per pupil increases by more than 10% in any year, then you do not qualify. Then you would have to go in front of a review board, and the review board could determine whether you qualify still for that 5% cap. As soon as you lose that 5% cap, you lose it for good. You're no longer eligible during this implementation period, which again is FY25 through FY29. So if you've reached that cap of 5%, so let's use a hypothetical situation. If you were disadvantaged by the change in this law and your tax rate was going to go up 15%, but then you're capped at that 5%, that 10% doesn't go away. It's just going to the side for this current year, and you're that it's being funded by the other districts in the state who are not reaching that 5%. And then the following year, if you have an increase of 10% and you hit that 5% cap, you're only paying the 5%, but that other 5% is still building up, and it's just kicking the can down the road. So in FY30, those thresholds, that 5% cap goes away. So if you've had a 10% increase every year and you've only had a 5% increase in your tax rate, those 5% have been building up. And that's the cliff that Chris was referring to. Because in FY30, districts are going to see the full tax rate. There's going to be no more hold harmless 5% threshold. During the period of FY25 through FY29, districts that are disadvantaged and are seeing those increases above those 5% are supposed to be working with their boards to find efficiencies, cut their budget, or be communicating with the communities to let them know that in order to fund our schools and fund them at these levels, they're going to see a tax rate increase in FY30. So it's sort of a 4-year implementation period to give districts time to either plan or make cuts so that they can soften that blow at the end. Again, fortunately for Wells Springs, it's not going to have a huge impact. And so if you go to page, the tax rate sheet on page 9, it should be the last page, I think. I'll walk through the process. So we take your education spending, and let's look at the one to the left, the grid to the left. We take your education spending, which is your total expense, minus your local revenues. Local revenues are anything other than property taxes. So it's tuition revenue, interest income, stuff like that. Your FY25 education spending is 5.8 million, and you divide it by your, it used to be equalized pupils, which is now long-term weighted ADM. So if you look at that second line, in FY24, your equalized pupils was 266. The new long-term weighted ADM is 474 students. So that's really shows you how the weighting has really changed. And your small schools are playing into that small schools piece, your FRL numbers. So you take your education spending divided by your long-term weighted ADM to get your education spending per long-term weighted ADM to come up with $12,385. If you go to that grid below that, the next piece of the puzzle is the property yield. So the property yield is recommended by the tax commissioner on December 1st, and then it's approved by the legislators usually in April or May. In FY24, the property yield was $15,479. But due to the increase in pupil count, so the pupil counts increase statewide based on this new new formula that they've developed. And because the pupil count has increased so significantly, there's still only the same amount of money in the ed fund. So what it's in order to generate the same amount of money, they need to decrease the state yield. So they take the equalized pupils and the state yield are sort of factors that are developed in order to take the ed fund and divide it on a district level. So you take your spending per pupil divided by the property yield to get your unified tax rate. So your unified tax rate is $1.31. Your unified tax rate in FY24 was $1.33. So you're actually seeing a 2% or a 2-cent decrease in your tax rate, even though your education spending is up 6.88%. The next piece of the calculation is the CLA. Right now I'm using last year's numbers because I don't have current year numbers yet. Which gives you the tax rates that are seen on the sheet, $1.52 and $1.57 for Middletown and Wells. So again, it's resulting in a 2.8-cent decrease for Middletown and a 2.9-cent decrease for Wells. So the three pieces though that are still pending and can change are the CLA, which we have in the next week. The property yield, which is just an estimate at this point, it can change up or down. And the equalized pupils long-term weighted ADM, which is just a preliminary number. So I'll speak to each of those two as far as where my thoughts are. Speaking about CLA first. So CLA is the common level appraisal that compares the fair market value to your assessed value of your home. As you can see, they're both in the mid 80s, and that is because over the last few years, we've seen skyrocketing home prices. We do know that home prices have slowed with the increase in interest rates. So I am hopeful that we should see with one of those years drop, it's a 3-year average. So with one of those years dropping off, that was a hot year, and this with a new year sort of slowing home prices, I'm hoping that CLA rates do stay steady, or possibly see a small uptick. The property yield, so there's two factors that could affect the property yield. So the first factor is that the tax commissioner's recommendation as represented in his letter is based on a 12% increase in educational spending statewide. My personal opinion is I think that's a high estimate. None of our districts in our SU are anywhere close to 12%. And I've spoken with several of the business planners who are not at 12% either. So I do think that is going to be a high estimate, and we should see an offset to that yield, which would drive the yield up, which would further lower tax rates if it came in below the 12%. The offset to that is that for all of those districts who are exceeding the 5%, that money still needs to be funded somehow. So if you have a district who spent 10%, but their tax rate's being capped at 5%, that other 5% has to be funded. And the way that that's currently being funded is it's being split across all the other districts in the state. And that is going to drive the yield down. So that factor driving the yield down and the 12% possibly being an overinflated number driving the yield up will offset each other to some degree. I would imagine we will see a change in the 9452. I don't really know where it's going to go, but I have a feeling that it might go up slightly. Again, going up will bring tax rates down. The last piece, equalized pupils. Again, that was a preliminary number. One factor that really does impact this is FRL numbers. And so two pieces on that. If you look at the column on the right, and you look at that same long-term weighted ADM, The columns, the chart on the right is looking at if Act 127 was in place last year. And so they've been calculating the long-term rated ADM for the last 3 years, based on the calculations that have been provided. And so based on last year's data, the long-term rated ADM was 446. So, and this year it's 474. So that's an increase of about 30 students. You have not seen an increase of 30 students. You've actually seen a decrease in enrollment at Wells Springs. The main change that's driving that is an increase in your FRL numbers. And the driver for that is that they made a change this year that any students that qualify for Medicaid are now directly certified. So it is bringing our FRL numbers up, district-wide and statewide. The positive piece to this is that this number does not represent any students that are attending out-of-state or private schools. None of those students have been captured as being FRL eligible. I've been working with our data manager over the last 2 weeks and reaching out to all of our private schools and out-of-state schools to try to figure out which students would be eligible, whether it's based on applications that they've submitted, or whether they have students in our schools that are in the same household who are either directly certified or who have filled out applications, so that we can make more of these students eligible, increasing our FRL percentage and bringing up our pupil count. So I do anticipate an increase in this number, which should have a very positive impact on your tax rate. I guess I'll open it up to questions and we can go from there.
Meredith?
Sorry, I had to find you. Really basic question. The difference between budgeted expenses and education expense spending, rather?
Education spending is your total expense minus your local revenue. So you take your expense and you subtract anything other than property taxes. So it's your tuition revenue, your interest income. It was your small schools grant, which you don't have anymore, but
so when we have a warning out, it's a 4.5, at least if we went with draft 2, it's a 4.5% increase on our budget, not a 6.8%, correct?
so that piece of the language has actually been removed. It was removed last year as part of Act 127. So this year, the warning will just have the total expense amount.
Okay.
But in the past, if we were using last year's language, it would have been your total spending per pupil, which is really, if you look at the data this year, because your pupil count has increased so significantly, the data wouldn't be reliable, because right now you're showing a 40% decrease in your spending per pupil.
Right.
Just your pupil count is almost doubled.
So it's really difficult to compare these numbers with last year's.
It is, yes. It should get easier as we, as all of this data stabilizes over the next years, and we have historical data that matches the same methodologies.
And so I kind of wanted to go back to, and it's just trying to understand the long-term waiting ADM. You said that, our numbers, we don't have numbers for students that are out of district, right?
Out of state
Out of
or
state.
private schools.
So that would be like our secondary students, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, okay, so I guess that's kind of, I don't know, maybe just a basic question. I didn't realize that even the secondary students, fell into this. I just, okay. So, all right.
So, and one thing that we need to work on for next year is, and it's something that we're learning this year and running into an issue is, so some of our private schools that we send students to do not participate in the federal lunch program. So they don't collect free and reduced data. They don't pull down direct cert information. For out of state schools, same issue. Either they're pulling direct cert data down only from their own state, so they're not pulling Vermont students, and they may be CEP, which means they're not, CEP is everybody eats free, so they're not collecting FRL data applications. So I think we need to work on a process for any of our students who are going to an out-of-state school or to a private program to provide them the household income form and ask them to complete it, even though their school may not be participating. Because for every student that we can make eligible, we're gaining, I believe, close to 1 pupil count, which could have a significant impact on our budget. So, I mean, if we're sending, say, if our free and reduced percentage is approximately 50% for the district, and we're sending 20 kids to a private school that doesn't participate in the federal program, that's potentially 10 students that we're losing out on generating income as far as in this new calculation. It's really putting us at a disadvantage for not having that data. So we do need to work on, figure out how we can get that data from those schools.
All right. That makes sense. Meredith?
So I was just trying to find it. I believe Long Trail reached out to families about that data. And I'm not sure if they were saying that the state is requiring them to do that, or I can't find the original email. And but they were asking that. It was like a survey, which I don't know how they were collating that data, like how it was identified or if it was not. But somebody seems to be trying to collect it from the independent schools.
So I don't know if this is a recent thing that they just sent, but last week we reached out to all of our independent schools and asked them for that data. We did find out from Long Trail that they don't participate in the federal lunch program. So they told us they don't have that data. So they may have reached out to parents. It's not something that we're required to provide. We're required to provide an answer for that field in the data collection that we've sent to the state. But if we don't have that data, we put that they're not eligible. So parents, same thing currently with FRL, free and reduced, FRL stands for free and reduced. Parents are not required to fill out an application. We encourage them to fill out the application because it benefits the school in many different ways. This is the newest way, which has the biggest impact, but it also affects our title funding, which is our grant funding. It impacts other grants. It impacts many revenue streams that the school gets. So it's important that families to complete that data. Again, they're not required to, but we really encourage them to.
Do you think you'll have issues getting that information from like New York schools at all, or is that kind of the same situation?
So the New York school did get back to us with a couple students that they received applications on. So we were able to count, I think it was 3 students, which is not anywhere close to the percentage we should be seeing. So I think it's a matter of working with them to really push them completing those forms. Maybe push is not the right word, but including those our forms. There's both an online link or a paper form that they can complete. Because Granville being our biggest out-of-state school, they are a CEP school, so they feed all students. Vermont feeds all students, but that is a state decision. CEP is a federal program which allows you to feed all students. And CEP was in place long before the state universal meals program. Because Granville is the CEP school, they are not pushing the FRL data as much because they're getting probably high direct cert numbers directly from the state. Direct cert is students who are directly certified for free and reduced lunch based on state programs that they may be part of, like SNAP, 3 Squares, or whatever the state of the New York State equivalents are. They're usually like food assistance or welfare, or any of those type of programs. If you're part of those, you're directly certified by the state as free and reduced eligible.
Okay. All right. So I have a few questions. On page 2, in regards to the budget. And I can't remember if we talked about this last month, but on page 2 at the bottom, under direct instruction, it says, where it says SU bill back regular, there was nothing there for this year, but so you added an additional amount for bill backs?
So this is a position that in last year was budgeted under teacher wages. So this is for Middletown. This is their interventionist position. So last year it was budgeted under teacher wages because it was budgeted as a Middletown position, which it is still, it was budgeted as being paid directly by Middletown. That position was moved to an SU position because it's partially funded through grant funds. And just the piece that's not funded through grant funds is billed back to Middletown. So typically you would see an increase in teacher wages from year to year because you have your increases in contractual increases. But if you look on that first line, you're actually seeing a decrease in teacher wages. There's no staff changes there. But it's because that position moved from a payroll position to a bill back. So those two lines offset each other.
Okay, that makes sense. Meredith?
Sorry, I hate to go back to that, but I just found it, and it is from the Vermont Agency of Education via Long Trail, a required form from the AOE. And it says it's independent schools complete this form as it can impact school funding. And they had both options to complete online and print and mail. So the AOE is collecting the information.
That's good. Okay. Can you send me a copy of that just so I have it for my records?
Of the form?
Or the notification?
Sure, I can do both actually.
Thank you.
It'll challenge me, but I can.
All right. My other question was on page 8. It was under the food service.
What service is on page 9? Or I'm sorry, it is on page 8. Yep.
So last year we have 92,000, and then there's nothing here on this line. So is it?
So I'm anticipating a decrease in our food service expense, and that is mainly because it's 2 reasons. One, mainly because it is a decrease in staff. So Wells went from 2 staff members to 1 staff member, and Middletown also had a part-timer last year, and they now just have 1 position as well. Wells' position was more hours, so that had definitely had a larger impact. And then there's also an increase in revenues, which is driving the total cost down.
Oh, okay. Where's that at? Is that going back to on page 7 where it says transfer out to reserve?
Yes, that first line.
Okay. Yeah, that's how I remember that line. That line's for food. That's
Yeah. And the details of that is what's on page 8. So
gotcha.
if you look on page 8, that that bottom line in the right-hand corner
Yep.
matches the FY25 budget amount.
All right. And then, the other question I had was, well, going back to, the small schools grant. And then you said that the weighting is based on the student count. What was it? What's the student count? Is it under 100 pupils or? I'm just curious,
They
like,
give you extra weighting based on the size of your school and how many students you actually have. So I mean, I can pull that number up and show exactly what we're getting.
But that is district, right? Not individual schools.
Correct. Each school is qualifying for the small schools revenue. So the small schools grant that you received prior was one number that was based on your unified district.
Right.
In the new funding formula, each school qualifies under the small schools, so each school is getting a portion of an increase in ADM credit.
oh,
And again, it is working out in your favor. I'll pull those exact numbers up in a minute.
okay. Well, I know it looks like it gets complicated. Talks about sparsity weight. I don't know, like. Yeah, see, I thought that was for the district. I didn't realize that even with this new weighting that it applies to each school, but
It gets a lot better that way.
So you're receiving 26.25 additional pupil counts. So if you take the 26.25 times 94.52, you're getting 248,000, the equivalent of 248,000. Last year, you only received 172,000.
okay. Well, that's good to know. Uh, where does it, the updated election cost?
So based on the discussion last meeting, I know nothing was officially approved, but I just made some estimates
Oh, okay,
based on the request of the new clerk for the town's election cost, for each town's election cost plus the higher clerk rate. But I think I added $1,250.
oh, okay. Where's that at? That
Under professional services, under Board of Education on page 6,
there it is.
that top section, professional services, I budgeted $2,750. The budget there was $1,500, so it's an increase of $1,250.
Okay,
And that's just an estimate. I know the board can make a decision on how they want to move forward, but I wanted to make sure that we had funds in the budget in case the board approved that request.
anyone else have questions about the budget? Concerns?
I know that Amanda had questions she wanted to bring up around transportation, but she's also, oh, is she here? Is she back?
Sorry, I'm back. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. Is now a good time for me to ask those or?
Yeah, if anything budget related.
Okay, I was just wondering, I didn't see anything in tonight's packet around transportation. But I know we had discussed at our last meeting, kind of taking a better look at it. And I guess my more direct question is, had we really looked at moving to one bus based on what Carol gave us? It seems like all of our K-6 kids would fit on one bus. And I didn't really see where it would extend the length of time they would be on the bus, given that they come to school the 20 minutes early, and our other kids leave Poultney 20 minutes early. So I wasn't sure if there was a deeper look into putting all of our elementary kids on one bus and saving that cost.
Don, do that because with Don, ability to know the routes and stuff like that.
Well, Don would develop, our bus company would develop the routes based on the information we provide them, but the board would have to provide parameters. Okay, we want to go to one bus and we want to make the time the same, then we would give that information to the bus company and they would figure out how we could do that and what we would have to change in order to do that.
Or if we kept two buses, if we felt there was a concern with going to one bus and they wanted to keep two buses, then potentially there's another dollar amount that we discuss billing to Corey Valley for those secondary kids rather than just the trip from Wells to Poultney, because it's really those high school kids that make us need a second bus as far as number of seats. And they would, the timing wouldn't be much different because they wouldn't have to get there 20 minutes early, and our secondary kids wouldn't have to leave early.
I mean, ultimately, this is a board decision on, I mean, really what you want to do. I mean, you have the information as to what I'm currently doing. I mean, if you want to have the cost savings and go down to one bus, I guess we would need you to charge us with that and tell us the parameters that or we can tell you what the impacts that would have. I mean, with the budget being down, the tax rate being down, I mean, like, the board needs to decide whether you want to make that cut now at this time and impact potentially student transportation when you have a tax rate that's down.
Right, that was my question. If making sure I understood what you were saying is that we are forecasted at this point with the current numbers to be at like a 2-cent reduction in the tax rate, potentially greater given the high forecast from the state treasurer. All of the factors that you're forecasting are high for us. So unlike last year where we were looking at options to cut, our choice right now is do we leave this on the table or do we make the cut when it's not necessarily forecasting to be needed? Did I
Similarly to last year, because of our budget was up so significantly, we were looking at cuts. We started the budget process so early last year. We didn't know any of the state factors. All we knew was that our expense was up significantly, so we started looking at cuts. But then in the last month, when we finally had that state data, all of that flushed out to us not having a tax rate increase, and we decided that it didn't make sense to make those cuts and have student impact or family impacts when we have a tax rate that's not up. We have the same situation this year based on just our local information. We have an expense budget that's up, but with all the other state data that's coming in and the impacts of 127, we're seeing we have a tax rate. So you can make the decisions to cut and have a further reduction, or you can continue to evaluate that next year, if you see that your budget's up, make those changes at that time.
Matt?
Hey, thank you. I still don't, I know we're potentially coming under budget compared to last year, and that's great. But isn't it this year, are we on in a contract year with busing, and it's not a bad idea at least to build in the contingencies for future years. So understanding maybe, what that scenario would cost, I don't think is a bad idea. What Amanda's, and Amanda, I think, has already stated exactly what her preferences are in sort of figuring that out. And I think I agree with that. So could we get a quote for what that looks like? And could we be certain that we can have a contingency for, like, say, next year we can get out of our contract or move down to the bus without any penalty to a single bus? And I don't think it's wasted effort. I think it's good to have these contingencies for years that maybe we have unforeseen budget increases. Thanks.
I did provide that data at a previous meeting. I had a conversation with the bus company, and so I provided the data that if we go down to one bus, it would cut the bus cost in half, as long as the routes were generally the same length of time. If we're increasing the routes, so if the bus route is going to be an extra half hour per trip, so half hour in the morning, half hour a day, it would cut the cost in half, plus it would add $32 per hour to the contract. So if it's an hour per day, it's whatever the half of that cost is, plus $32 times 180 days. We're adding an hour to the route, then it's $64 in the morning, $64 in the afternoon, $64 in the afternoon. So we have all of that information already. It's really, does the board want to make that decision to reduce the busing?
Okay, so just if I could just add to that. So I guess the consideration then is, so that's helpful. I'd be curious to see, Amanda was mentioning a potential share with Core Valley or whatever that bus is for the secondary students. Interested if we could offload some of that expense while maintaining two buses, and either this year or next year. And then also just to see if we have any protection in a contract year for going down to a second bus in the next, say, 4 or 5 years. If this is a contract year and if it's for the next 5 years.
So the current contract does allow us to make changes mid-contract for many different reasons. It allows us to make changes based on changes in students, based on changes in funding. So we have that flexibility in our current contract. As far as the Corey Valley, so Corey Valley is paying for the bus that picks the students up at Wells School and brings them to Polteny High School. Corey Valley is not paying for the piece where you're picking up the students at their house and bringing them up at Wells. That piece of the transportation is open to any secondary students. So students that are going to Granville, students that are going to Long Trail, Burn, any of those students have the option of hopping on those buses and bringing them to the Wells School. So it's not a Corey Valley bus run. It is a full Wells school district, or Wells town bus run. So it's open to all elementary and all secondary students.
Got it. Thank you.
And if I remember when we talked about this last month though, too, you were saying that, the buses aren't going out of their way to pick up secondary students, correct? Because that was a concern as well, because if the buses were, as opposed to, stopping where they pick up the elementary students, it's extending the time and the distance.
Correct. Removing the secondary students off the route would not change the price.
Okay. Amanda?
How much does Granville pay us?
Pay you for what?
Like, does Granville pay us anything to get their kids, or they just send their own bus?
Granville sends their own bus to pick the students up. I believe there was an issue last year, and they were working with our bus company to bus those students. But they're paying the cost of bringing the students from Wells to Granville.
Okay. And like as far as I understand, like you're saying, you know, all of the secondary kids could get on, but they really can't because our route is written around Poultney, and it just happens to be that Granville can pick their kids up. That's why we get to school at 7:30, and then Poultney has to leave. Our kids leave at 2:30 in the afternoon to get back to pick up Wells kids. So our secondary kids aren't even staying in school the whole time. So I think that if we're going to continue having them leave early and have our elementary kids get there late, then we either need to ask for a larger dollar amount from Corey Valley to cover the bus to accommodate their kids, which makes us need 2 buses for number of seats, or we need another bus option where our elementary kids don't arrive early and our high school kids don't leave early. Because we're really technically transporting secondary education that we're not supposed to. And we're also not offering equal and equitable if they're leaving early. So that's my problem with the bus, I guess. And so that would be a savings if we fixed that.
The Wells students are leaving Poultney High School.
Wells students leave Poultney High School at 2:30. Their day gets over at 2:45. So they leave 15 minutes early every day. And there are times that they miss out on things that need to be done in the classroom, especially if it's a science lab or, you know, something that's going on, because they have to get back to pick up our elementary kids. So therefore, we technically are paying to transport them, and they're leaving early to accommodate.
Changed a couple of years ago. Maybe it was like 2 years ago. I don't have the details of the schedules. I'm not part of that equation. I think that's
They should not be leaving school early to get a bus. That's great.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was going on with my kids being in school.
Okay.
leaving early.
Yeah, they were doing that back when my girls were in here.
I think it just becomes a Corey Valley thing. Like Corey Valley needs a bus, not us to have our kids leave early. We're paying for their accommodations.
All right. Well,
The kids are. It's
maybe that's
terrible.
something that can be looked into. But aside from that, I guess back to the transportation and buses. I think, Carr brings up a good point about transportation, but, we did ask, for some of this information at our previous meetings in regards to, potentially cost saving measures around transportation, specifically, could a shorter bus route, different bus route, pickup locations, can those things get students to school in a timely manner? We're not spending time on the bus. And I think that's something that would be good to look into, because if there's different ways we can look at this, and I don't know how everyone else feels, but one bus picking up the elementary kids for Wells, or keeping two buses and having one for Middletown and one for Wells picking up elementary kids. So I think, there's an element of, equity in there too, but I don't know. Matt?
Yeah, I think this is all good discussion, but I do want to make sure that we follow up on the kids going home early because it's just a busing. So I think that's something we can't I think that needs to be maybe an item for Chris. Is that something you could look into and give us an answer for?
Yeah, I think that really, the Corey Valley discussion around it there, how they transport their kids back to Wells and whether or not they provide a separate bus run. So that's something which, Lewis and I will bring to the board tomorrow night. Because I know that, so that's something which we could take a look at around that bus run about the kids getting home and having to leave early.
Yeah, I mean, just to.
Right, and Corey Valley may have to, take a look at whether not running a separate bus, which, gets his kids home on time, or they may look at whether they can transport the kids. So that's a discussion.
But I think at a minimum, these kids should be, not missing labs. So
Well, right, Matt,
that's
right.
really concerning. So
Well,
I think,
Matt,
I think that, yeah, go ahead.
That's the discussion that we will have, is that either A, we look at getting, potentially get another bus so these Polden kids can maintain a full day of school, or then they will look at whether or not they can provide transportation, because we do look at, there are busing issues as well. So if by, shifting this, we may look at whether or not these students can be transported home from Polden High School.
Maybe they should give us some money back since we're paying them. They could give us like money back per person, and we can use it to give them the lab back when they get here. But I think that I'll just reiterate, they should be in the labs. I mean, I think that that's kind of ridiculous that we're pulling them early. So we should take care of our students.
Okay. Any other further discussion on this? On the budget, transportation?
I mean, if there's no objections to the budget in front of you, I mean, it would be my recommendation tonight to approve the budget. I mean, none of the data I don't think any of the data that we'll get between now and next month will have a significant impact on the budget, result in making additional cuts. You're happy with current tax rate. Definitely, it's your decision. You can wait until next month.
I feel it's really important for us to get this information out to the public. So I kind of am thinking I'm in favor of approving the budget now and letting people know how relatively good this is.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would support putting it up for a vote tonight.
All right. Well, someone can put it to a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the budget as presented tonight.
Any further discussion on the budget?
I guess before you actually vote, since we're in discussion, one thing we haven't talked about tonight, which we may have talked about in the past, is right now we don't have another article on the ballot to move any of the surplus to reserve funds. See, if you did that, it would change your tax rate. I mean, I think in today's environment, going to the taxpayers with a budget tax rate that's down is definitely a positive sign. So I don't know that you'd want to put money in a reserve fund if it's going to at least too much of it, that would result in a tax rate that's up.
I saw that the surplus was in this budget and I was fine with that. I mean, that's just my thought, seeing how we did what, 125,000 last year for capital improvement. So
I saw the 125, like Article 9 on the draft warning, and I assumed we were going to do that again.
that's last year's.
That was just a carryover. I think it was highlighted,
Right.
on the draft, just in case the board decided they wanted to do it again. This budget does not represent anything.
Okay. All right. All right. So if there's no other discussion. All those in favor of approving the budget as presented?
Sorry,
Matt?
quick question. So are we doing a reserve fund? Because I'm not against that, considering the aging of our buildings. And does that have to be in place before we vote on the budget?
Mabel, no, thank you.
We would have to, if there's support for taking the surplus into a capital maintenance fund, it would change this budget here. So,
But it's still accessible left the way it is, correct?
no, because the surplus from last year's in
Oh, right.
this budget. So, and keep in mind, we still have this, the surplus in the capital maintenance reserve fund from previous year's budget. Okay. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Hi.
Two. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay,
Yeah, the person is making that.
all right. So we're gonna do a roll call really quick, just because it's not unanimous. All right. So say yes or no if you're in favor of approving the budget. Meredith,
Yes.
Cara,
Yes.
Amanda,
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Okay, and okay, and then one no. All right, motion carries, and we have a budget. All right, is that everything, Louis? What's that?
You guys are good.
Okay, that will move on to new business, town meeting.
So these are just informational items, just to confirm that the 2024 information meeting will be February 28th at Middletown Springs, 7 p.m. We had, and this has been on all the local districts, but our potential carousel meeting, there will be no need for a carousel meeting for Wells Springs, considering that you passed your budget tonight. And what we can do around at the next meeting, those confirm, we can have a warning available for January for the board to approve, and then we can collect signatures. Those people who are present. It would be great to have as many board members present as possible so we can get physical signatures as opposed to trying to coordinate the following day. But if that's the case, then we'll have to look at how we're going to collect those signatures. We just need a quorum of signatures on the warning, but it does look much better when we have everyone signing that. So.
All right. Yeah, so we can, we'll just approve the actual warning next month. I did see that other districts, instead of having all member signatures on there, it was just one signature for the chair to sign on behalf of the board once it's approved. I don't know what people think about that as an option, because I know in the past, collecting signatures has always kind of been, but just an idea. I see on here that it says for Article 7 that it's the Middletown Springs term says 2 years. It should be 3 years.
Okay. Yep, we'll make that clear. Thank you.
All right. All right. We're moving on to policy. That is, if no one else had any questions about the annual meeting. Matt?
Hey, just for the record, I'm good with you signing on behalf of the board.
What's that?
Have to be a motion.
Yeah, yeah. And then, well, on top of that, we don't actually have the warning. So, I mean, okay,
Can make that change. We have 2 drafts for you, one with just the board chair's signature, one with all. And then at the next meeting, the board can make a motion to approve.
okay, yeah.
Or
If we can decide then, that sounds good. Yeah. I like
Yeah,
that.
like if we don't have enough in person, then we could do that or something. I'd be fine either way.
Makes sense. All right. All right. Policies. All right. So we have, let's see, 4 policies for adoption. B4, notice of non-discrimination. C1, board meetings, agenda preparation, distribution, professional development, and weapons and firearms. Is there a motion to adopt those policies?
I'll make that motion.
A motion by Amanda. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right. The other 2 policies are first reads. Now, there's a driver's education policy in there. And just for those who don't follow the SU, the policy committee actually other 2 districts in the supervisory union have their own driver's education policy. So it was suggested at the policy committee meeting, why don't we have a GRCSU policy for driver's education? So that's how this came to be. It's pretty much like the one that we adopted earlier this year, but I think there was some language change in there. Meredith?
Yeah, I was wondering, the way I read it, it said that we have students that don't attend a GRICSU school have to ask if they can get driver's ed at a GRICSU school before they can go out on their own. That first sentence.
Yep. Yeah, so the idea behind that is if there's a driver's ed program within the GRCSU, a student would be eligible to take that program rather than paying for it out of pocket. So I think,
But are those programs happening during the day, during the school day?
So Meredith, currently, yes, that is correct, that we have, our driver's ed programs are part of our core evaluation. We do, have the option, and we are looking at this, to have summer programming. Well, because our assistants during the year just can't take that, but that's something to explore. So that's, I think, in this particular case, a student could take advantage of the GRCSU summer program, if it was being offered at that time.
Okay, so, but is it required that that they take it through GRICSU? That's what's not clear to me.
they have to at least try to attempt to take it within the supervisory union first. And, some of the discussions we had at the policy committee meeting was, that from like a Well Springs perspective, that's not always the case, and even if there's a program available, they fill up quick, So if you try to get in to, let's say, if there's one if there is a summer program available in Rutland or Poultney, hypothetically, and if one of our students tried to get in and they couldn't, well, that's where the reimbursement comes in. So I think that's kind of the idea behind it. But yeah.
I just feel like that's, I don't think it's reasonable. I'm not sure it's reasonable for the Granville students to require, because the summer they, have other commitments going on, and I just don't understand how you can require them to try to get into a program, and then how do you discern if it doesn't work for them, but it works for the program? You know what I'm saying? It's you don't get both sides. I don't know. I don't see how the judgment is made as to whether they tried to get into a program if they can't fit it in their schedule because of the location.
I don't know. The way I kind of interpreted this was that, if you were able to get into a program that's offered in the supervisory union, you wouldn't be paying out,
But so it would only be the summer. That would be your only option.
right? That's the way I understand it. Yeah. I mean, but exactly, especially for,
Well, I feel like it's a bit of an obstacle, that's all.
Yeah, I guess I missed that piece too. So like if your student could potentially get their license in September, but now it's all school year, they have to wait until potentially in the summer, and then, they can't go, then now they're held up from their next steps because our supervisory union wanted them to wait and maybe go to Rutland.
Man, I don't know if it doesn't ask anybody to wait. I think what it's really saying is that if we offer a program, they have to at least, attempt to access that program. But if get a situation such as that, we wouldn't be denying that individual come back and say, it makes no sense for me to wait till the summer, and then I want to access the 550 to be reimbursed. We're not looking to punish anyone. I think with this, it's more offering the fact that we have slots available that students can access these slots. But if it doesn't work out for them, then we have monies available. So we're actually trying to open this up to students so they can access. I don't think we're trying to limit things. We're actually just saying if we have spots available, that they have a right to access these spots as part of the GRCSU.
Okay, but if there is a spot, say we have someone coming from Middletown and there is a spot available in Rutland, but it's, 40 minutes from them, but they could potentially go to Paulet where it's 15 minutes. They could choose to still go to Paulet even if there's an opening in Rutland, or would they be required to go to Rutland or not accept the reimbursement?
I think that's a discussion of the board.
Yeah, that's the part that was kind of bothering me. That is how do you judge their accessibility? It's
yeah. No, that makes sense. When you put it this way, it makes sense. And so, my response to that is, this can go back. I mean, we don't have to, we can have further discussions, but I would ask, do you have suggestive language that we can bring back to the committee that would help clarify this too?
I feel like this is a case where the administrative process would come into play. Like, could the form that Chris creates for people to apply for this include explain to us the efforts you've made to access this? So that could capture the kids with September birthdays who can't wait till June to take the class, or people who have jobs or transport siblings who can't wait, or who go to Granville and can't wait. Like, this is intended to be an asset and not a barrier. So I feel like the administrative process.
So, Karen, I think I agree. I think something the board would wish for me to do and look at the form. I think we have to understand, I think $550 is a reimbursement. That doesn't cover the total cost. And I think also, when we look at this, and I'm saying this, and I don't know if the language captures this, and I think that's where we can bring this back to policy, but we're really trying to sit there and say to a family in Wells or Middletown who is, who, let's say maybe a Long Trail doesn't offer driver's education, instead of the family having to pay, here's $550, but they're still paying $300, $400 out of pocket. We have a spot available that they can access, in which save the family money. So they would not being paid out of pocket. So that's where, the way I look at it is, if we have spots available in summer that these students have access to that, but we're not trying to deny access, obviously but for a family, it might be more cost effective to access the SU program during the summer and save some money as opposed to take the $550, but incur the additional cost. And so that I think there might be some wording that needs to be done, but so this is, when I sat down, we talked about this, it really was about providing access for all students in our SU, just to eliminate cost potentially. And yes, there is a major hurdle that when we move driver's education to, it's part of our regular education program, but we did talk, and like Bruce and myself and the admins, about still offering a summer program for some of our students in school, for a variety of situations, as well as situations such as this, where there might be some students within our SU who need access to a driver's education program.
I think you can solve it by not saying the student must first attempt and have been denied. You just need to explain the availability of the programs, particularly the summer program. But you just don't need to say must.
I think, must offer some explanation of circumstances and efforts to access rather than must have documentation of denial or ineligibility. I mean, I think there's a way to soften it and still gather the information needed. And if I remember the last time we did our policy, this is an incredibly underutilized resource. Like,
Correct.
we couldn't think that anybody had ever claimed this money, or very, very few had. And so I think we should change that because we want people to be aware of resources, but also for the few people that go through the effort to claim it, I feel like they will have the documentation more likely than not for why they're claiming the money.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that. We'll send this back and come back with some more clarifying language if everyone's all right with that. And
Yeah,
then
I would hate for we had enough issues with the policy changing and the funding for people to go through the whole process of doing, expecting the $550 and subsidizing it out of their own pocket, only to find out that they didn't ask the SU if there was a spot for their kid, and now they're out money completely. That's what this policy is telling me right now. Is that if I sign my kid up for, Yankee driving school because that's what worked for our family, and I'm willing to pay the extra $300, now I'm going to find out after the fact. And yeah, I should have, I guess, found out ahead of time, but we already are having issues with these policies because they're also underutilized.
okay, that makes sense. All right, sounds good. Amanda?
I was just going to add, when we look at it again and go over, it also isn't clear, like, how do they ask the SU? Do they call Christine and then she calls all the schools and says, do you have room for another student? Or are they expected to call every location in the SU, and where is that contact information if that's the expectation?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good one. I would imagine that in our situation where we have students that go to quite a few different schools, secondary schools, it can that would definitely clear up on how to access these programs. But
Maybe it just says, that they must be offered a spot if available within our SU.
yeah. Well, you're on the policy committee too, so.
I know, it's always while I'm at work at 5 o'clock.
Okay. All right. So we'll bring that one back. All right. So the other policy is pre-K admission policy. Are there any questions about this policy? If not, we'll bring this back for adoption, and If someone wants to make a motion to warn it for adoption for next month.
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Cara. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, no executive session. Second public comment. Heather, did you have anything tonight? Okay, wait. No other public comment? Mary Beth?
Hey, yeah, so I just have a few things to say, and I'll try to make it quick. So just a quick question. As of right now, as the budget is presented to you guys right now, we do have a surplus. But that surplus will be used potentially to buy down the tax rate. Is that correct? I need you. Just for one second.
Yeah,
So currently in the budget that was presented, the surplus is being used to buy down the tax rate.
Okay, so having that said, I really wish that we could think about using the money this year that we didn't necessarily anticipate seeing. Only because, considering we're losing key positions. So I looked back and Susan has been with the district for 26 years and she's currently making $44K. I know there's not enough staff in each school. I know Chris and Caroline came back to me today and said, hey, mommy, today was, kind of an unusual day. Both Mr. Kanan and Miss Williams were absent and Miss Smith had to step in and teach both first grade and second grade. And also I know that just bringing up the AC and heating systems aren't updated in either of our schools. So when I see Scott, which is the managing director of our properties, in the parking lot and we give a wave, I know that he's dealing with the two oldest school the two oldest school buildings in our district. So having that said, I just had two more quick opinions on maybe we could possibly considering incentivizing the paperwork for the free and reduced lunch. I know that FFE had been talking about scholarships and how we should come up with those parameters. But when Corey and Susan both came back to us saying that using the information off of the free and reduced lunch paperwork that families choose to fill out, not all families choose to fill out that paperwork. So I'm just wondering if there could be a raffle or, a gift card or something that could incentivize families and maybe getting kids involved. I can't remember if it gives personal information and if maybe that deters some families from filling that paperwork out. And then the last thing I would say is that as a sub for a few days at Middletown Springs, which I loved because I know the kids, I know the staff. I would love to see like a program that I could step into where like I could shadow maybe a Wells teacher for the day. So like she would be like, you know what, if there's a fire drill, this is your paperwork right here, or this is how we use the intercom if you need help, or these are where the the teacher bathrooms are. So I think I was a little intimidated to going to other schools because I was so unfamiliar with those, with that that big task of having a new student population and a new school. So and I think that might bring more people in that would substitute at their home school and then maybe branch out to other schools. Considering it seems like when I look at the schedule for subs, each school is really in need of someone every day or every other day throughout each week. So so those were my couple points. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mary Beth. Heather, are you there?
Yes.
Did you have any comment for tonight?
Eric, I always do. Hang on one second. I just made a couple quick notes. I guess last year, and I missed the first couple seconds of Mary's comments, but I believe that last year the budget process was sort of finalized in February prior to the town meeting day. And it would have been great if some of the town's folks could have reviewed it prior to today's meeting to provide commentary. I'm a little bit concerned about the school climate in Middletown Springs, to be honest, particularly because of Susan's sudden departure after 25 years of service. I would love for her to have her voice heard about the reasons for her decision to leave. I did complete the survey that went out to parents. It's such a small school. I think it would be more useful to get people in the same room to have a conversation. And then my final comment is just about scheduling. Once again, Middletown Springs is a super small school. And somehow we're gonna have the winter sports program on Monday, immediately followed by the rock climbing. It's a conflict that most families can't deal with because they can't either pick up their child in Rutland or at Pico, wait for an hour and a half until rock climbing starts, and then wait an hour and a half for rock climbing. You know, likewise, it's kind of an almost impossible feat to pick up in Middletown Springs and then bring your child who was just passing by the rock climbing walls back to Rutland to rock climbing for an hour and a half practice. So there's just some things that I, as a parent, am concerned about. I feel that I've reached out to the principal at Middletown Springs several times, and I kind of like get I would say like 40% response rate. So it's concerning to me. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Heather. Okay.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? I know it's public comment. Susan's resignation is not effective immediately. Did I miss that detail? It looked in the records that it was effective like a year from now, or maybe am I misunderstanding what was written in her
That is correct.
letter?
That is correct.
It's in the end of June.
Next year.
Next
No,
year.
it's the end of the 2024,
Oh, yeah, that's
25 school year. So it's actually 18 months notice of her intent to retire.
Yeah.
So I think she may be, approaching 30 years when she actually leaves our service. So I just want to make sure I was not misunderstanding the documents. Thank you.
Yeah, that is correct. And that just pertains to language in the agreement.
Just often confused where there are people who will notify a year and a half because the language is a little confusing, but that's something we're working through. So notify as well in advance.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So our next meeting is January 10th. I don't think
There is a hand up, Eric. I didn't know if you wanted to address that.
that was Mary Beth. She already asked.
Yeah, Eric, I just had one more thing, and then I'll let you guys go. I'm just wondering with the surplus that we're using to buy down the tax rate. I think you said around 125K. I'm just wondering if there's any way that we could let the families know that may ask me or may ask one of the school members or what that really equates to as far as, the dollar amount that you would potentially see in a savings for each family, or depending on, what parameters the taxes are. I know that could be more than I would think or it could be less. I'm just wondering if we could somehow just run those numbers and see what really, we're saving each family and buying the tax rate down with the surplus.
Well, that's stuff we can have for the annual meeting for sure. Well, since we approved the budget, we don't need to change our meeting.
If that's your call. I mean, I will have more data next month as far as
Okay.
we should have a better number on the long-term weighted ADM, and we'll have our CLA data.
Oh, okay.
The yield still will be pending.
Yeah.
But those other two pieces should be a lot firmer than they are now.
Okay. So yeah, the suggestion is Lewis can't make our January 10th meeting. So can everyone attend the meeting on January 3rd, a week earlier instead? So that way he can bring us this information. Okay.
January 3rd is fine with me.
Is that moving the meeting from the 10th to the 3rd or a special meeting on the 3rd?
Nope, moving it to the 3rd.
Okay. Then yes, the 3rd works for me. I mean, it works for me either way, but just yes.
Yep, works for me.
Okay, Matt?
I'm sorry. Everything so fluctuates here. I think so. It's my best guess. Sorry.
Okay. Sue?
Put it in.
Put it in? Okay.
That's the best I can do.
All right. All right, we'll do that. We'll do the 3rd and hope for the best, I guess. All right. So that's it. We'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Matt to adjourn at 7:57. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.